Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Liverpool, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal are in front.
It's time to take a trip down memory lane to relive past glory, back to the best years of Arsenal, when we finished third and got knocked out in the quarters. This is the Arsenal Vision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. That's right. The glory days, the golden years. Back when we could finish third in the Premier League and get knocked out in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. But you know what? It was a good season, and the season we're talking about, well, maybe you don't remember it as a good season. I do. We'll get into that. It's the 07-08 season. That's right. For the next 3 days, we're going to be taking you through it. Today, we're going to walk through the season. Tomorrow, Clive and I are going to do a rewatch of the away derby that season in the league. And then on Friday, we're going to talk about the aftermath and how the way this team broke up sort of changed the trajectory of the club. But this was the team that was the rebuilding project. Thierry Henry had gone in the summer. The Invincibles were gone. And it was time to look forward. And what this team was able to do and the football they played inspired a lot of hope. And there were a lot of interesting characters and moments in the season. And so we're going to talk about that with Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stoberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, guys, right? Like, obviously, we relive the Invincibles over and over and over again, rightfully so, and for good reason. There are lots of books. There are lots of podcasts. I mean, Arsblog has done some amazing work on the Invincible season and that team. But I think the years following the Invincibles blend together a lot. And there's certainly a lot of interesting stories and interesting years. And given the COVID-19 situation, we may wind up going over all of them. But 2007 was really the start of it, sort of the proper beginning of a new era that would come to be known as, you know, the Emirates era and Project Youth at various times. And so let's set it up this way. Tim, let's talk a little bit about that summer and where we were as fans and where we were as a club, because that summer Thierry Henry finally leaves for Barcelona. Reyes goes, Ljungberg goes. The last of the Invincibles, I mean, I think Gilberto Silva stuck around another season, but the last of the Invincibles are breaking up. And the 2006-07 season hadn't ended well. And I think there was a perception that it was going to be a long, tough road for Arsenal, and especially with the impending ascendancy of not just Chelsea, but Manchester City as well. So maybe you can talk to me a little bit about where you were mentally as regards Arsenal that summer, your expectations, and sort of the process of saying goodbye to the Invincibles and what you were expecting to come.
Yeah, I remember being in a very different place to most Arsenal fans, because I was writing and blogging regularly during this summer, and because a lot of people, you know, we sold Thierry Henry, and I understand this. A lot of people thought, "Oh my God, we're selling Thierry Henry. What are we doing?" I thought that was a really necessary sale, and had the stadium not been there, I kind of thought he should have gone a year or two earlier. I think we'd just come to that stage where the player had become a bit too big, possibly in his own mind, but definitely like tactically. It was too much based around him. It kind of reminded me of latter day George Graham and Ian Wright, where the game plan was don't concede a goal, give the ball to Ian Wright, hope he does something. And I felt like there was a team bubbling below Henry. And actually what happened in the 06-07 season that I think it's worth going over is we had this constant flip between 4-5-1 and 4-4-2. And the reason for that is because if you build your team around Henry, you want 4-4-2. You need him up front. You need like a number 10 behind him. If you're building your team around Fabregas, you need 4-5-1. And Arsenal constantly switched back between the two during 06-07. And I was looking at it and I was thinking, Fabregas is 18, Henry's 29 and he's got sciatica. There's only one way this is going. And so I always had the I was ready for Henry to go, even though, you know, which is not to say he was shit or anything. He clearly wasn't. It's just sometimes it's time, you know. And so I was actually happy is the wrong word. I was far more content with that sale than most Arsenal fans. And the same for Freddie Ljungberg as well. As much as I love Freddie, he wasn't the same after that hip injury, and I thought that was a really necessary sale as well. So I was quite happy with that, and I just felt that with the likes of Van Persie and the likes of Fabregas, I didn't even really feel like we needed a massive replacement. And actually, if you remember, what we did was we bought Eduardo, who, although a striker, was not an Henry replacement. Really, he was a good, savvy addition, a smart addition. I felt gave us something. We weren't going to have that one guy anymore who was going to score 30, 35 goals, back permitting. So we had Van Persie, we had Adebayor. At the end of 06-07, Fabregas started scoring goals. He had a massive goal drought, and then in April 07 he broke it, and then he scored in I think 3 games in a row. And I remember Wenger saying, when I watched Fabregas when he was 15, 16, I was watching him score hat-tricks. I was watching him score lots of goals, and I think that's the part of his game to come. And so I was thinking, I fancy Fabregas is gonna find his feet in front of goal. We've got Adebayor, we've got Van Persie, we've added Eduardo. I just felt like it looked like a more rounded team. And the other thing we did was we bought Bakary Sagna. I knew nothing about Bakary Sagna, but I felt we needed a right back because I wasn't sold on Eboué or Justin Hoyt. And I thought, okay, that to me looks...
Imagine.
Yeah, indeed. And I thought, okay, that looks smart to me. We've got Gallas at the back, who, remember, this summer was made captain as well. And I'm sure we'll come on to this later, so I won't go through the whole Gilberto Silva, Flamini, Gallas captain triangle that all kicked off that summer. But I thought, okay, this to me looks like it's got the bones of, the team after the Invincibles. I felt like it was taking shape, and we had Walcott, who at that time was, I think 19 maybe. And I was thinking, yeah, there's something here. There's something I think I can get behind. So I was actually quite buoyant going into this season, but I don't think most Arsenal fans were.
Certainly not expecting us to start the season 22 league matches unbeaten or over the start of the season in the prior season. No, I would not imagine so. Clive, I mean, this is a period where, the talismanic striker is leaving. The last of the Invincibles are going. There are a lot of players people don't know a lot about. The leader of the team is now, a young midfielder who is a precocious talent, but certainly, I don't think anybody knew exactly what he'd be capable of with a reformed team. I mean, for you, were you expecting a season of mediocrity, a season of pain? I mean, we'd come off one with a lot of disappointment. I will never, ever forget the Champions League exit the season before against Ajax, where, nope, I already forgot it. It was PSV. And the reason I said Ajax is it was Alex, right, who rose to head a corner late to give them an away goals win that really knocked the stuffing out of us. We went out of the FA Cup, the League Cup, everything all in, a 2-week span. So there was a lot of pain that we had just come from, and I don't think that things look particularly bright. Were you expecting a long period of decline for the club before we would maybe see another rise to prominence?
I don't know if I was expecting a decline, but what we were doing at the time wasn't done by many teams. I mean, what we were doing, getting young players from abroad, having a couple of years in reserves and putting them into the squad, that process was just starting. And I don't think, you can sit back with confidence and say, yeah, this is going to really, really work. Really talented players, but you need to sort of see them. And also, I think there was a bit of a leadership void. I know this is how I felt. I felt that obviously when Henry sort of left, he was everything, captain, coach, favourite schoolboy in the playground. He was everything, right? So, and we depended upon him, moody or not, back injury or not, when he warmed up or not. We felt comfortable when certain names were there. I felt we were transitioning from having special names to having a team, and I don't think everyone felt comfortable with that. I know I didn't. I wasn't the same guy I am today, maturity-wise, and so I'm just looking at it thinking, yeah, this is all right. But the competition wasn't so bad. We didn't have a Man City, didn't have, 5 other teams trying to kick us off that Champions League spot. So it felt like we were still looking upward, but not expecting to be first, but still looking upward. And so that was good. And obviously Fabregas at the time, I personally took a while to to warm to a change, from a Vieira, Gilberto type security and physicality to moving towards Fabregas and Flamini, and it took me a while to feel comfortable with that. And so I don't think I was alone with that. I think that transition away from having the tallest, fastest counter-attack team that basically won games in the tunnel to having a team with ball players, number 10s, pass and move. I think that took a bit of time. But not only for us did it take time. I think it took time for the English game to get used to these players. And I've always felt this, you heard me say this before, I felt that was a period when Arsenal became the foreign team in the Premier League. We were starting to play a brand of rotational pass and move, the early phases of tiki-taka football. We were starting to bring that to the Premier League, and people were thinking, well, we're not having that. Let's get stuck into them. It has almost felt to me on many occasions, I always felt that we were refereed slightly differently because of the way we played, the technical arrogance that we had. And I just felt that it made us a target for other teams that didn't have this way of playing. And I felt we was almost like the 21st team. You know what I mean? The team that we needed to be sorted out. Now let's do it our way. Let's do it this way. We're going to show you that the way you play is not the way it's going to be, and stop trying to be arrogant with how your style, etc. So I always felt that. I always felt a little bit like it was us against everybody else. But then as the season went on, you started to see players develop, which I'm sure we'll go on to. And then your confidence grew. But there was a confidence with an underlying, how long is this going to last type feeling. That's what I felt at the time. And those feelings haven't really left me.
Well, all right. So let's get into the season a little bit. And some of the decisions that had to be made by Arsene Wenger and some of the sort of personalities that came to the fore in that season. I think one of the things that would be easy to slip through the cracks of this discussion, because there's so many interesting things in midfield and in central defense and the ebbs and flow of the season. We'll get to the highs in a minute, but early on in the season, Tim, there were some things that happened that I think made a profound impact on where the season would end and maybe even the future of the club for the next several seasons. And that is that Jens Lehmann made a couple of big mistakes early in the season. One that I think he had a goal.
Almunia.
No, Jens Lehmann.
Lehmann. Yeah.
And Lehmann had a goal go in, I think, off his leg, and one where we recovered it to win, but then another that he just let go through his hands, and we dropped points. And because of that, Wenger made the decision to switch to Manuel Almunia, a decision that I think had long range. Well, you're right, Clive. The Manuel Almunia mistakes did not become a rarity by any means, but I think that decision to move on from Lehmann to Almunia had some pretty major repercussions and was a mistake that Wenger made. And so I'm curious to get your take on, whether you feel it was time for him to move on from Lehmann, whether the decision to switch to Almunia and make him the first choice keeper ultimately may have played a role in how the season culminated and really the next several years at Arsenal, where the goalkeeping position was kind of a quagmire. I mean, did he pull the trigger too quickly on that move?
So no, I think it was a long-term error, but not a short-term one.
Interesting. Okay.
Manuel Almunia had a really good season this season. I don't remember too many mistakes from him, and he kept his place. You're right. So Jens made, in the first 5 minutes of the season, he literally passed the ball to David Healy of Fulham to put them 1-0 up. And you're right, Arsenal recovered that. And then a week later at Blackburn, David Dunn hits a shot straight at him and Jens spills it into the net. I think we remember Jens very fondly because in many ways he was an excellent goalkeeper with a great big game mentality, and he was a bit of a character, but he was a bit of a liability as well. He was dropped twice during his time at Arsenal, and I felt he deserved to be dropped on this occasion. And Almunia came in, and Almunia kept the shirt for, well, he actually ended up keeping it for another few years, but he stayed in the team, I think, on merit in this season. And, that massive long unbeaten run we go on at the beginning, he's in for all of it. So I don't think in the short term that was an error. So I think a couple of things happened in this season, and I completely understand them, that weren't planned, that happened, and they kind of kept working, so we kept rolling with it. And one of them was Almunia, which I don't think cost us in this season, but it cost us in subsequent seasons. The other one we were talking about off mic just before, because for me, the biggest and most amazing things that happened this summer, I don't know if you want to call it the Gilberto incident, the Diarra incident, the Flamini incident, but is Matthew Flamini breaking into the team, which is not in the plan at all. Birmingham tried to buy him, but wouldn't pay him what Arsenal are paying him. So he ended up staying. He's got 1 year left on his contract. Arsenal don't want him. But then we have an injury crisis in midfield at the beginning of the season. Diarra hasn't been signed yet. Denilson and Song are considered too young. Diaby's just come back from injury. And Gilberto went away to the Copa America and captained Brazil, and they won it out in Venezuela. And that was curtains for Gilberto's career, because he came back late, which meant that not only did he not get the captaincy and William Gallas got it, but then he loses his place to Flamini, because Flamini comes in and he starts playing brilliantly. And you can completely understand, having completely by accident stumbled upon this kind of midfield axis, we just keep Flamini going, and I get that. But then in the long run, we lose Lassana Diarra, who we signed. And we put that signing in motion because we didn't count on Flamini. We knew Gilberto was getting older. Denilson and Song are too young, so Diarra comes in, and we get nothing out of him because Flamini kind of ruins the plan for everyone, for Gilberto, etc., and we make Gallas captain, and of course, Flamini ends up going on a free and all of that. So that's the kind of stuff where we made some short-term decisions because, frankly, we got on a roll and we got on a good run of form and we were top of the league and we kept going with it, and I understand that.
Yeah, and before I turn it over to you, Clive, this is what's tough. I want to be critical of Arsene Wenger switching to Manuel Almunia. And that is informed partly by my feelings about Almunia generally. And I want to be critical of not using Diarra more and Gilberto Silva more, although Gilberto Silva played a lot that season, and leaning into Flamini. But undefeated through December. Here's something that a lot of people don't know about this squad. The first ever team to reach 60 points in the league in February. Ever. It had never been done before. It was, not in the Premier League era. I don't know how far back that goes, but they were the first team to do it. This wasn't a team that was doing okay and had a shot at the title. This was a team that was setting records. This was a team that Pele in November said is the best football team on the planet right now. They're playing the best football. It was a delightful team to watch. It is some of the best football I have ever watched Arsenal play, full stop, including the Invincibles. They were magnificent to watch. Adebayor, I think, was on 24 league goals that season, crossed the 30-goal threshold in all competitions. Fabregas had 7 goals, and I want to say like 14 or 15 assists, something like that. I'll have to check that. But Hleb was doing Hleb stuff, dribbling around and making short passes, and no one could take the ball off him. And there were just lots of really exciting, influential players that popped up with interesting moments. Eduardo was sort of a poacher. Robin Van Persie I want to say he was flitting around the team as well. There was just
he was.
Yep. So there was a lot going on there that was really fun to watch, and it was a really good season. And so while you can be critical of decisions because you know how the season ended, at one point, this was a dominant Arsenal team, and there was there was a lot of good football played along the way. So, Clive, I know you're particularly critical of what happened with Diarra. You want to sort of explore that a little bit?
Yeah, well, he's nailed the Gilberto bit absolutely perfectly. So you go into the league into a situation where Gilberto was a player that I loved a lot and was looking, I think, should have been our captain that year. We get Gallas in. And not only do we get Gallas in, we give him the number 10 shirt, which is like, what are you doing? Do you know what I mean? It's like, why are you making him captain, giving number 10? That to me sort of reeked of, we're so glad to have you. And I didn't like that. I wasn't quite sure about the Gallas-Torre partnership because I felt there was no big man. There were 2 tracking defenders, but I didn't see anybody wanting to take charge. I didn't. Good for wide space defending, but I didn't see the physicality I'd like to see. If you think of the back four with Sangler and Clichy, that's quite a sharp back four, much quicker than we've got today. And then you go into centre mid, and the centre mid, we got a chance with Gilberto. We have Diarra, a sprinting cruncher, absolutely wins races all over the pitch. And when he wins it, he gets out of pressure and keeps it. We're a player that played for Real Madrid for years. I mean, we're talking about a quality individual. We got Flamini, I think, did we get him from Marseille? I think we got him from Marseille,
yes,
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I remember when he left Marseille, he sort of left in a strange way. We got him for free. I think it was a contractual issue. And so this guy was always somebody, I don't think he ever went for a transfer fee in his career. So you have a situation where he's in the last 6 months of his contract. You've got Diarra, you've got Gilberto. Who do we choose to play? We choose the one that's got 6 months to go. We don't choose the ones with a contract. That sort of stuff started to tell me that we're starting to make bad decisions. So we end up in a situation where obviously we were being picked on physically. Flamini was a hard-working player, not bad physical player, but I didn't think he had the presence and the stature and the gravitas of Gilberto or Diarra. And we had Fabregas. And for me, you have to say to yourself, what's the best mix? And I felt we got that wrong. I really felt we got that wrong. And that, to me, we end up in a situation into the season where we lose Diarra, Flamini walks out the door for free, and we break Gilberto's heart. So, well done. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We lose, rather than losing one, we lose 3 players. You know, and that, to me, is crap. And I remember at the time, and I was fuming at the time, and I just think that we started to see some bad decisions. We started to see player-led decisions. We started to see a weakness there. And I felt the focus of the club had switched a little bit to financials, fiscal moves, money was spoken about, sponsorship deals were spoken about. How can we get the most out of these young players? And it became a vehicle which I felt suited a developmental coach. I'm the best one. I brought these players in. I'm the best person to bring these guys forward. And he was very unfortunate it didn't work out for him. But, you know, there was something there that was exciting. But I felt he could have loaded the dice a bit more on his side, Wenger, to make sure that we reached the conclusion that I felt this team deserved to reach.
Yeah, I mean, it is so hard because this is a season that, up to a point, vastly exceeded anybody's expectations. And so you can say with those players and with that group, he got the formula exactly right to get a performance out of them that was at one point, you know, among the best in the Premier League over many, many years, if not ever. And then it collapsed. And you can certainly point to some of the decisions he made that may have precipitated that collapse and precipitated that collapse over several seasons. But also there were some factors that we'll get into, from injuries, refereeing decisions, you know, whatever the case may be. But before we talk about the tail end of the season, because there's a lot of intrigue around that and some of the things that happen. Let's get to some of the high points. I loved watching this team play. Do you want to pick a league and then maybe Champions League game that stand out for you from this season, Tim?
I will resist the Spurs away one because you guys are going to do the rewatch.
Tomorrow, yeah. Thank you.
So, all right, I am going to go for one because there was also Spurs at home, but I feel like that's too obvious. There was actually one that came in the middle of an awful spell of form at Bolton.
Mm-hmm. Weren't we 2-0 down, I want to say?
We were 2-0 down and down to 10 men. And as 5 years earlier, we'd effectively lost the league title by going to Bolton, going 2-0 up and losing a 2-0 lead. And every season after, and we played Bolton a couple of times in the Cups as well. So we were going there like, you know, we must have been there 7-8 times since then by the time we went to this game. And every season they used to sing to us 2-0 and you fucked it up. And even though at the time it was quite clear we'd already blown the league and there wasn't an awful lot riding on it, to go 2-0 down and down to 10 and then beat them 3-2 in the last minute was, let me tell you, fucking glorious. It was absolutely amazing. It was just one of those things, like because we kept losing at Bolton as well. It's like our real like bogey ground.
Well, the following seasons it got worse, right? I mean, the Sam Allardyce Bolton teams bullied us a lot, and I can remember some pretty bad days for Almunia against them.
Actually, no, it didn't. This was kind of the point where it turned round. It was in the
okay? This was the culmination. So I may have my dates wrong. I just remember getting physically bullied by them in quite a few games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, Allardyce had gone by this point. He'd gone to Newcastle and got himself sacked. But every year, we'd quite often go 2-0 down to Bolton, and we'd all turn to each other and go, "I'd love to fucking turn it round on them just once, just to shut them up." And yeah, it was. It didn't have an awful lot of meaning, and it didn't. I think we kind of knew that at the time in the grand scheme of things, but. When it happened, it was absolutely glorious, and anyone who doesn't remember it, if you Google it, one of the first images you'll get is an absolute rain-sodden Cesc Fabregas, who it was actually an own goal, the last-minute winner, but he gets the last touch, and the look on his face as he runs away was like rain.
Like 8 deflections when it Tim on that goal.
Yeah. And like the rain's just like pouring down his face, and he's got that look on his face like he's about to cry. That I'll pick that one because it's not quite so obvious.
I'll come back to you for Champions League. Let's let Clive in here for a league game, and then we'll do the Champions League because there were a couple of good ones there as well. Clive?
Yeah, well, I can't. I can't get Spurs out of my head.
Yeah, you have to pick
Spurs away. I can't get it out of my head, but I do remember that Bolton game, and it sort of epitomised exactly what I was talking about earlier. I felt there was a suspicion and a feeling that we didn't like it up us, and Bolton epitomised that. So that win felt like more because we had a sending off, because we could get kicked to death. As soon as we kicked anybody back, we were sent off immediately. Then the old mantra of how many red cards has Wenger got comes up in the press. It used to really annoy me. We didn't have the stats about fouls against in those days. It's always red cards and yellow cards, and our reputation was deemed as being the worst in the league, even though we had the lightest, smallest, one of the youngest teams, and we were the victims. But as soon as we reacted, we were the ones that suffered, and Bolton sort of epitomised that. And, to do it in that way sort of shoved it back up those people that said that we couldn't play against the Boltons, who was that day Stoke, basically. We had Stoke to come. Right? So,
there was the Blackburn team also, I remember, weren't they? They bullied us a bit. Didn't they have their chance for a while? Or am I misremembering that too? We got bullied by a lot of teams, to be fair.
They did. And I suppose... Yeah, I can't see. I enjoyed the Spurs game mostly just because it's them, obviously. But the way it was done, the goals, the style of the goals, the panache, that was a great example of that team really working really, really well. So yeah, that game stayed with me. But also the last goal, Adebayor's goal, and when that goes in and you just get the flick of their seats going up, and I love that when that happens, right? So because there's no greater when you're at Spurs, and it's a challenging day for those who's been to that ground before. It's a challenging day getting in. It's a challenging day getting out. I promise you that. So the bit in between, it better be good, and it's one of those days when it was good.
Yeah. Look. I think any season you do the double in the league over Spurs is a good one, and that was a particularly good one. But there were some fun European ties that season as well, and I know there's one you're particularly keen to highlight, Tim. So I'll let you have the first run at. Clive's not getting any favors here because he's going to want to say the same.
I don't mind.
Okay, have a first crack at it. Yeah.
So I'm going to leave Milan
to Clive. Okay.
Yeah. And instead, I'm going to go, because I do remember it really fondly. We beat Slavia Prague 7-0 in the group stage. Yep. And some of the football we played that night, again, I think it's the 6th goal in that game. I think it might have been Clive who scored it, but it's just the most wonderful team goal. And I know it's only Slavia Prague and it's the group stage, but when you're just watching your team and you know that they're on really, really good form and their tails are up and they're confident and everyone's fit, and you walk into the ground and you think, yeah, we're gonna do these tonight, and they just play this absolutely wonderful football, and it's that kind of, it's almost like the economies of scale effect, where you just that everything's going right and everything's clicking. and you just go, yeah, these lot haven't got a chance. And we absolutely blew them away. And there are some absolutely beautiful goals in that game. And it was just, I think it was the height of that season, not because it was, the emotional high, but actually, I mean, if you look at the Premier League fixtures, we actually, whisper it quietly, we had a really gentle start to the season. So there was a good chance to really build up momentum, and we took that chance. And then we get like Liverpool and Man U consecutively, and we draw with both of them, and you're like, okay, all right, we've not lost, we've held our own. But this kind of came in the middle of that run where Arsenal were in, pure footballing terms, at their absolute peak, and poor Slavia just did not stand a chance.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that Arsene Wenger's teams would go on to sort of really be defined by over the period of Project Youth and during the Emirates era was beating up the weak teams. I mean, that's how we finished fourth a lot of those seasons, and it was always fun to watch. And this season, Arsenal definitely did that. I think, wasn't the awful Derby County team in the league that season, and I think we put 6 past them in one of the games. 7 past Slavia Prague. And those are fun games. Certainly something we haven't seen in recent seasons. All right, Clive, you want to talk about Milan? You want me to set the stage?
Yeah.
Let me set the stage real quick. So it's the quarterfinals of the Champions League. It's a 0-0 draw at home. And no English team has ever beaten Milan at the San Siro. So over to Italy we travel, facing Maldini, Kaladze, Pato, Gattuso, Inzaghi, Nesta, Pirlo, Kaká, Ambrosini, and Otto, with Gilardino coming off the bench. We had Almunia, Diaby, Sanya, Fabregas, Senderos, Gallus, Hleb, Flamini, Clichy, Adebayor, Abue. You want to take it from there?
Yeah, I suppose the whole... If you want to pick a night where you could be proud of your club and proud of a philosophy, and to build a team like Wenger built into, from 2002 to 2006, lose the Champions League, and then recreate this team. It's completely different. You got to tip your hat. You got to tip your hat. And if there was a night to epitomise it, when Tim picked Slavia Prague, I suppose, that face that Tim spoke about that Fabregas had at Bolton, it was a similar face after he scored this goal at Milan. And I always felt that was the night Wenger had his more perfect team, playing the way he wants to play, with a young team, with stars he was building. I felt that's where he wanted to be. That's where he wanted to go. He had freedom. He knew he was important to the club's future. We knew that we had our mortgage based on him being in the building. And so he felt as though he could experiment and he could bring something new to the British game. And no one had done anything in Milan Stadium. And we went there and basically, played them off the park, but played with bravery and panache, and then executed goals towards the end of the game and won the tie. And yeah, to see that, I didn't go to that game, but to see that on TV, it was a night when you felt extremely proud. But I will say that I know we look back at this team and we are really, really looking back and we're talking fondly. But what I remember a lot about that season was, and the previous seasons, was the amount of summers that were ruined for me, with Vieira going, Henry going. And even in this season, there was talk of Kleb going, Flamini going, Diarra going. There was talk of us buying Anelka back, which we should have done in January. And I seem to remember we built this team, we built this way of playing, and everyone loved our players. And we lived with a vulnerability from the market, and we knew that we were short of money, and we lived with a vulnerability physically that in the English game we could be dominated, and we lived with a suspicion that eventually this was going to run out if we didn't quite invest in key areas. And that's the feeling I had. And funny enough, I remember the good stuff, but I remember that feeling as much. I remember that, and I'm thinking, if we'd have just got an Elko, what then happened to Eduardo? Maybe we could have we could have bounced on, and Anelka goes to Chelsea. That gutted me. We should have got him back. And there were situations there with the family we spoke earlier. There were just decisions that if we just flicked the dice our way, I could have gone a little bit better. But if you're talking positive, which one, I'm trying to stay positive, that night in Milan was as good as it gets. And I have to say, a game that didn't work out for us, but there were some moments in the Anfield game which are in the quarterfinals, which I thought was as good, if not better. So that's the way it goes.
Yeah, I mean, Fabregas scoring from 30 yards out in the San Siro, to put us through. And I know Adebayor had, I think, a stoppage time goal as well to make it 2-0. But that's Ancelotti in his prime with Milan, fairly in their prime, at least pretty much. And Arsene Wenger's young Arsenal team beating them at the San Siro is a huge moment. So, I mean, before we get to what happened with this season, because I think it really is quite incredible what happened. Tim, is there a player or a couple of players that stand out for you that season that made the season unexpectedly fun? I mean, not Cesc Fabregas. Cesc Fabregas is a player you expected to enjoy watching, every time he put on an Arsenal shirt. But who were the personalities that season that came to define what was good about it for you?
I think Alex Kleb was one of them. I think he went up a gear that season, and unfortunately, I think that all went to his head in the end. But he had a kind of 6-7 months in that season where I thought he was extraordinary, and I thought that tactically he was a big part of the reason Fabregas started scoring again, because of his ability to keep the ball. Basically, Fabregas would effectively give him the ball and then run forward, and he felt confident making that forward run because not only did he have Flamini behind him, but he knew that Kleb wasn't going to lose it. And also I thought Kleb and Eduardo were quite key to something that, I said we were flitting between 4-4-2 and 4-5-1 the season before. We actually did it this season as well, and not a lot of people remember. But when we used to go away from home, once Van Persie was injured, we put Eduardo in. But a lot of people don't remember that Eduardo played on the left wing as well. And actually, when we bought him, that was the case. He was known as a guy who could play left forward or centre forward. And what we used to do away from home is we used to kind of put him out wide left. So when we didn't have the ball, there were 5 in midfield. And then when we broke, he moved in centrally. He's kind of almost like Aubameyang-esque, I guess. And it's something we did really successfully a few seasons earlier with Sylvain Wiltord. When Bergkamp started kind of getting on a bit, we used to go away from home and we'd play Henry up front, and we'd put Sylvain Wiltord there, and Wiltord would be somewhere between a right winger and a second striker. And we were doing that with Eduardo away from home, and Kleb was quite often playing in more of a number 10 role. And I remember there was a game at Aston Villa away in December 2007 where Kleb absolutely ran the show. He absolutely ran the show. And then John Carew, the big Norwegian striker, took him out. Put what I'd generously describe as a tackle on him, and he needed stitches in his shin, and he had to come off.
The good old reducer, I believe they call that, right?
Yes. Yeah, and he still won man of the match despite having to come off like 15 minutes before the end. And that's how good he was. They just went, right, we're getting rid of you. So I think him and the interrelation with Rosicky as well, and because Rosicky could come inside, that allowed Eduardo to go outside. So there were a lot of tactically interesting things happening. And I think Kleb and Eduardo, by being a little bit versatile, they basically allowed Adebayor to stay up front and Cesc Fabregas to kind of do what he wanted. So I think, and I think it's worth saying, Bakary Sagna came in and was a bit of a revelation. Like, none of us knew anything about him, and within 5-6 games I just remember thinking, yep, he'll do. And that's pretty much what I ended up thinking until his last ever game. And so I think there were a couple of interesting kind of tactical things going on. I don't think it was just this big dumb run of momentum.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy when go ahead, Clive, please.
Well, Tim's got a fantastic memory, right? And then we need to sit down and have a drink, Tim. We can actually sit next to each other because it's amazing what we remember. Because that left-hand side thing with Eduardo, for me, was a good thing, but I also think it was a bad thing because what it actually did, and I don't know if you guys agree with me, but he played that sort of tucked-in left role at Birmingham. And what he does is, you're taking a guy that should be receiving the ball, who was a killer around the box, had pictures all around him, and he's now receiving the ball in areas of the pitch which are a lot deeper, where he can be, he's just, crowd scenes, which you're used to crowd scenes where you're looking for one touch, second touch is a shot. When it's when you're looking for passes and movements, you need to be moving in a slightly different way. And I always remember thinking, I want him up front. Play him in the two. I'm not saying it's just the fault of tactics, but I remember Adebayor played that day up front against Birmingham, and Eduardo received it slightly deeper, and also we know what happened. It's not his fault. It's just tactically I felt it was a strange position to be in, and I don't want him there. And it's just, again, it's developing tactics, trying to make use of your good players. The guy was in great form. He was just bubbling, Eduardo was. That's so criminal about that injury, was we could all see, we'd replaced the strike force in a good way. We had three really good forwards, and you're thinking, this could really go somewhere. We know we had injury problems with Van Persie, Adebayor, but we had this other guy, and it's like, oh my God, this is amazing, rather than just relying on one player. So when we lost him, it felt cruel, because the way he played, the way he finished, the way he fixed things in the box was just incredible, and I think we could all see that we had something, and it was just taken away. So again, that's what I remember about Eduardo playing that role. And you're absolutely right, Tim, and he'd go and join in, but he wasn't as leggy as Aubameyang, and so I always felt it was difficult for him to do that. And although it suited us, I'm not sure it ever suited him.
And that injury against Birmingham, you're right, he picks it up in that area of the pitch. It happens in the first 5 minutes, which is kind of because Birmingham have been, pumped full
fired up,
like bull hormones, and told to get into them. But Eduardo used to hold that position. I used to watch it all the time. First 10, 15 minutes, Eduardo, stay wide. We're 4-5-1 for the first 15, and then you come out of your hole, and then you join in and have that like little and large. So, 10, 15 minutes later in the match, he probably wouldn't have been there. It was like it was a bit of an early holding pattern in a game that he was there and held his position. And then after that, it got more fluid, which I think also demonstrates like that this team was tactically intelligent, that we'd built up that flexibility. So even when we lost, because momentum like we had at the beginning of the season, that only ever lasts so long. No one gets that for a whole season. You might get it for long enough to win you the league. You might get it long enough to win you 10, 11 games in a row and whatever. But for the rest of the time, you need something else. And I thought we developed that something else. We came out of the autumn. We weren't quite firing like we were earlier in the season, but we found a way to win games. We found a way to be solid, and then to, kind of do that slow, quick, slow thing that really, really good teams can do. And we lost it. Like, not only we did lose it mentally after that, but I also just think that we honestly lost it a bit tactically, because we just didn't have the players to do what we'd been doing.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's time to turn the corner and get to the part of the season that a lot of people remember, which is how it finished. And so you set it up and you say, I think with 12 games to play, we were 5 points clear at the top. The first team, as I mentioned, to be on 60 points in February. And, there were challenges. I mean, obviously, one of the things that really derailed that season was injury to Van Persie, injury to Thomas Rosicky. Obviously, that we've spoken about the Eduardo injury, but we're about to speak about it more. It made the squad a little smaller, and you know what happens when you get into February, March. Suddenly, you're playing every 3 days with a relatively small and inexperienced team. You've suffered some injuries, and now the issues start to pop up. So before we get to Birmingham, let's talk about the quarterfinal. I know it comes later in the season, but I don't think a lot of people really remember how this went down. The Arsenal-Liverpool quarterfinal in the Champions League. Tim, the first leg is at home. and it's a 1-1 draw. Adebayor canceled out by Dirk Kuyt. But what I remember is Alex Kleb being absolutely murdered in the box. And no call. I also remember, I think it was the first leg, wasn't it? Was it Nick Bentner clearing a Fabregas shot off the line? These two events were heartbreaking. But, I mean, I know you love talking about refereeing decisions. Do you remember the Kleb incident? And do you remember thinking at the time that it was absolutely criminal?
Yeah. Particularly when you look at the angle of it from behind and you see what the referee see, and the referee's view is absolutely like it couldn't be better. He's got the camera eye view on it, and when I watch it back, sometimes I look at it and I think, why didn't you think? Like I sometimes. Like a lot of the time, I understand. I try to understand, decisions. It's like, well, heat of the moment, and you've got to be sure. And I always think back, what did I think at the moment, or did I just react to several dozen replays? Like, what did I honestly think in that moment? But this one is just one of those fairly rare ones where it's like, yeah, that was exactly what it looked like, and you had a brilliant view of it, and I just can't understand where the doubt was in your mind. And yeah, and look, I think the thing is with seasons like this, right? We've done a lot of the stuff you need to do to win big trophies. We went on the run. We got the momentum, and then that died a bit, as it always does, and we found the way to win. And then sometimes you just need a couple of things to go for you. And to be completely fair, in ensuing seasons when we were kind of fighting for fourth, we got those moments. We got those things that went for us when perhaps they could have gone the other way. And perhaps we lucked into fourth a couple of times. But this is one of those seasons where those things just didn't go for us. They just didn't go for us. And, some of that was because perhaps it was a young team that didn't know how to manage those moments. But I don't think you can just totally discount the extent to which, whatever you want to call it, luck, serendipity, fortune, like you do need those things sometimes. And I think it was clear that night. I just remember thinking after that this has turned now. This is all going wrong. And we'd been playing badly, but we played well that night, and we were up for it. And we hadn't, it wasn't a mental thing. I don't think it was there were some league results around that time that were mental. Like it was just, these guys they've taken their eye off the ball. They can't handle it. But this was not one of those nights. And it was just one of those nights I remember coming away thinking, I feel like this is all winding down to an obvious conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason this one hurt so bad also is we were the better team in both legs. We were the better team in the first leg. We were the better team in the second leg. We were a better team than them that season. We outplayed them. We were the victim of a Nick Bentner disaster class and then two really horrible refereeing decisions. Because in the second leg, to your point, Clive, we outplayed them and we were going through. And Ryan Babel just throws himself to the ground. And to go out to Liverpool in the quarterfinals of the Champions League with Chelsea waiting in the semifinal and then ultimately United in the final, when we'd had such a good season, this was a chance to salvage it. At this point, it's April. We knew that I think our league ambitions were already gone. But we saw ourselves play some of the football that had made it a special season against Liverpool. And really were robbed. I mean, did you feel that sense of injustice when it happened? And I mean, for you, which is the worst call? The Hleb penalty not given or the Babel penalty given late in the second leg to decide it?
You're trying to make me cry, aren't you?
Yeah, it was
really
horrible. I
cry.
may have cried that night.
Yeah, I can remember this one really clear. Funny enough, as you look back, for me, I remember the pain more than I remember the joy a lot more. And I was in Tokyo with work on this one, so I was up in the night.
Yeah, I feel for you, man. That sucks.
And watching it, and basically, I was trying to ring home. I was literally talking on the phone, on my own phone, charging myself just to make sure I could get this game in. And it was everything. Obviously, Diaby, the player that I really liked. He was tremendous that night. He scored the first goal. They came back into the game. And then And then we scored an unbelievable goal in the 84th minute.
So
We did really
Walcott
well.
long run to Adebayor?
Yeah, exactly. So Walcott came on. He ran past the whole team. And I think there was a situation where once he'd gone past the whole team, it was like 4-on-1. He then passed it across the area and Adebayor scores. At that moment in time, I don't think I could be happier in my whole life. I thought, this is it. We've gone to Anfield, one of those great European nights, and we stuck it to them. We've got the goals that we need. That's it. It's over. I only got 5 minutes or so to go. And it was indicative of us. We just lacked that solidity, that calmness, that experience. And they just get the ball into an area and they drive in, and Babel, he just pretended he got pulled and just fell over. The referee just couldn't wait to point to the spot. You just think to yourself, this is just not meant to be.
And there was no danger, right? If I remember, he was like the edge of the box on the near side of the pitch to watch it on TV.
If you remember it, the sort of thing, sorry mate, the foul started outside of the box. And if there was a foul, if there was a touch, it started outside the box. And he managed to twist and turn and stay on his feet and then collapse inside the box. And I just thought it was a crap decision. It was a crap Homer decision. And it cost us the game. And our hearts were broken after that. And they ran away and scored the next goal. And that was it. It was done. But for me, that was I always say Chelsea 2004 that broke my heart. 2006, it hurt me. What could have been, in Paris. But we were there on the showpiece game, and there was a lot of pride involved in that as well. We didn't lose to a bunch of the dog and duck, it's Barcelona. But this game really bothered me, quite close to Chelsea, because I felt it could have propelled the team on, maybe. Could have given us some confidence. We needed that real moment, that real poster moment. We needed that, and that would have been it, and particularly in England, to show everybody we could do it, and the suspicion was gone, and it just didn't work out. So yeah, heartbreaking.
Yeah, and to me, I just remember being like, all right, fine, either give us the Hleb penalty and then also give them the Babel penalty, or don't give either. It felt so infuriating because a mugging in the box in the first leg had not been given, and then a tap, and it really just felt like a homer call at Anfield. And you look back at the Champions League after that, and the Van Persie sending off in Barcelona, obviously, just so many Champions League calls that went against us down the years, and that one was particularly painful. And it is a shame because at that point already, Tim, a league season that I think deserved so much more was gone for us. When we drew at at Birmingham, it started a run of 1 win in 8 that ended our chances to win the title. This team still finished on 83 points with just 3 losses, 74 goals scored, I believe. As I mentioned, completed a 22-match unbeaten run to start the season, 60 points in February. I mean, it was really an extraordinary team in a lot of ways, and it just came totally unstuck at Birmingham. And I think that there are some other things that happened subsequent to that people don't remember, and there was a game against Manchester United that was hugely important. Maybe we can come on to that in a moment. But do you want to quickly give an oral history of that night in Birmingham and the ramifications of it?
Yeah. So that game in Birmingham, I think we were 4 clear at the top, and this win would have put us 7 or something like that.
5 clear, and it would have been 8.
5.
Yep.
Yes. Yes. That's it. And it was the early kickoff, and we thought
it would have been 8 with 11 to play.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And we'd beaten Blackburn at home 2 weeks earlier to go 8 points clear on a Monday night. The following Saturday after that, we went to Old Trafford in the FA Cup, and I don't usually when people say we threw the game, they're exaggerating. We threw the game at Old Trafford and lost 4-0 almost deliberately. In fact, Arsene Wenger said explicitly before that cup tie, I'd rather lose than draw and go to a replay. So we threw that out the window. And I just remember thinking, I couldn't give a shit. That's fine with me. And we went to Birmingham, and, the Eduardo thing happens inside the first few minutes. And obviously that's really shocking for everyone. And I remember it at the time. And like weirdly, I even have a photo because it went on for so long. In the treatment and everything, I think it was a good 10-11 minute stoppage. Weirdly, I have a photo that I was looking at the other day, like of the scene, as it were, and it's just horrible. Everyone's got their head in their hands. All of the players are either looking away or visibly shaken and in tears, and all of this. And like we knew absolutely immediately. They brought the oxygen out, everything. Like we knew what had happened, and we could see it. And then for the next kind of 20 minutes, games are a non-event. Unfortunately, seen this quite a few times now. Games become a non-event for about 20 minutes after that happens because everyone's shell-shocked. But then we managed to get ourselves in front with 2 goals from Theo Walcott. And you're thinking, right, here we go. Okay, Walcott's burst onto the scene. That's amazing because we're going to need him now that Eduardo and Van Persie are injured and Rosicki's injured. So that's great. And we were thinking, right, Theo's arrived. Wonderful. And then just in the last minute, Birmingham are doing absolutely nothing. They've been down to 10 men for 86 minutes or whatever. And then Gael Clichy has a little daydream in the penalty area. And to be honest, it's still a bit of a scandalous penalty call.
Scandalous. Don't say bit. Come on, mate.
I mean, it's not a penalty at all. I think it was Stuart Parnaby. It's a dive.
It's one of those situations, though, right, where you find yourself furious with the referee who's blown it and furious with the player who doesn't even need to let that situation develop. Yeah.
Yes, because he should have just put his foot through that, and I think the final whistle would have gone. And instead, he starts counting sheep or something. And incidentally, I think that Gael Clichy hit a bit of a downward curve after that. And then all of this is going on, and then I just remember my mate going, "Look at William Gallas. What is he doing?" And he was on the halfway line, like kicking the advertising hoarding in. But weirdly, like I didn't pay that incident much mind at the time. I was like, "Oh yeah, so he is." I think I was so depressed. And I don't remember anyone talking about it on the way home either. It was subsequently, Sky, understandably, Sky made a really big deal of it. And so it wasn't until I got home, really, because this was, before the smartphone, really. So I wasn't on the internet on the way home. It wasn't until I got home that I realised that this was such a big talking point about what Gallas had done. But yeah, obviously they score. And I tell you what, I got home that night and I went out. And I was meant to go out with one of my best mates, and I was thinking about, do I cancel this? I feel awful. And I went, and it's one of those where I went out and I thought, I'll try and drink the blues away here a little bit. And I went out, and I shouldn't have, because I was thoroughly miserable. I should have just gone home and gone to bed. United thumped Newcastle, I think 5-0. And it was weird because I went very, very quickly from thinking, shit, we're going to win the league, to no. It just, I don't know, it sounds like hindsight, but it really felt like it went in that moment. I felt psychologically beaten up by it, and I'm not saying I therefore immediately had the thought, well, the players will be. I just remember, in my own little kind of selfish head thinking, fucking hell, like I actually feel really bad, like this is really bad. And it's always quite shocking seeing an injury like that and immediately understanding the gravity of it. And it affected me psychologically, and not necessarily just because I thought it might affect us winning the league. On a human level, it honestly shook me a little bit.
Yeah, it was devastating. Anyone want to take just a quick guess at who gave the penalty?
Mike Dean.
It was Mike Dean. Yeah. I mean, of course it was. And I mean, you think about this for a minute. The Invincibles are broken up. Arsene Wenger has built a team out of thin air, out of players, many of whom people didn't know, out of kids, out of smart buys. Thierry Henry is gone. Freddie Ljungberg has just gone. He's put his invincible goalkeeper on the bench. He's playing Matthew Flamini, which, wrong for all the reasons you mentioned, Clive, but a brave decision and all of this stuff. And he's about to go 8 points clear with 11 games to play. And Eduardo, he's already lost Rosicky for the season. He's already lost Van Persie for the season, or thereabouts. I think he did. Eduardo gets his leg broken. Mike Dean gives a penalty that isn't in the 90+5 or whatever the hell it is. And you go from going 8 points clear to, losing ground in a game that you had won against 10 men Birmingham. And if you talk about mental strength and what made the Invincibles so special and what made those Arsene Wenger teams before this so special and their ability to rise to the occasion, and then you see Arsenal fail to beat Villa, fail to beat Wigan, fail to beat Middlesbrough, lose to Chelsea, beat Bolton, fail to beat Liverpool, lose at United. That was it. That's how you wind up finishing third. But Clive, I cannot remember a lot of heartbreak in the league that I felt as keenly as I felt that day. The emotion of the injustice of a penalty, having it ripped away in the last moment, the heartbreak for Eduardo and seeing what happened to him. It really was a moment emotionally as a fan over 90 minutes that is about as low as you can go. Do you remember it that viscerally?
I remember it, and what I remember thinking was, as Kleb and Fabregas and Flamini and all these players were looking at this guy on the floor after we've been kicked for most of the season, you know what I was thinking? I'm thinking, I wouldn't blame them if they left. Because why should they stay in this league and not be protected? Because this could going to happen to me, right? And obviously, a few years later, we ran around and did a similar thing happened. And Diaby, obviously. So this is not the first. This wasn't the first time. There were incidents, it's just. I think there was even one with Adebayor when he was kicked but he was off the pitch and he was smashed and then he was out injured and that's when we liked him. And obviously Van Persie. I think I remember Tim. I might have got my dates mixed up, but I think he had a thigh injury at the time, and it was something stupid like he was injured. And he told the physio that he was okay. He played
against Chelsea. Yeah, he came on. He came on in December against Chelsea when we beat them 1-0, and he kind of lied about his fitness, and then he was out for 3 months.
3 months. That talent out for 3 months. It's a season of details. It really was for me. Details around the centre midfield decisioning. Bad, I think, transfer purchasing or lack of in January to not seize the moment. Try to do it on the skinniest budget we could possibly do it on, and then the Van Persie injury. Obviously, the Eduardo injury is an uncontrollable variable, but the Van Persie one, with hindsight experience, or maybe inexperience of youth, cost him because he thought, I can get through it, and his thigh exploded, and we lose him. And you look at the league table at the end of the season, and you think to yourself, But I felt psychologically we were weak. I felt we had this weakness. We had this ability to derail. Going back to 2003 when Sol Campbell, his elbows sort of went into Solskjaer's face, and we managed to make that hole really big, and we fell into it. And obviously things that happened in the Champions League later on. But that day against Burnham, I think at the end of it, were we like 6 points clear when the final whistle went? Something like that. We were 6 points clear. I think we had a game. We played a game more. Yeah, but we're still top. So where was that person saying, we're in this? But we all felt the same because we all thought it wasn't 8. It wasn't 8 points. It's only 6. With a game in hand, it's over. Man, we'd sign up for that right now, wouldn't we? Those points differential. And at the top of the league, we'd sign up immediately. So our whole mentality, I felt at the time, was we were almost waiting for something to go wrong so we could throw ourselves into that hole. And it went wrong, and we threw ourselves into it. And that's what we were. And we needed a Vieira type. We needed that player to say, this is not happening to us. We're going to control it. But what we did is we had William Gallas, who was the most fragile, emotional captain, exactly what we didn't need. And that's why the issue was made bigger, because we had chosen him to lead us. And it was just the wrong type of individual required at the wrong moment.
Have you ever seen anything like that from a player, let alone a leader, let alone a captain? I mean, I can understand being upset about the Eduardo thing, but the kicking the hoardings and the pouting on the pitch and the crying on the pitch, I can't remember a scene like that.
Well, you know what? We all felt the same. right? So
Well,
you
yeah,
can't
but
show
I'm
it
not the
when you're
captain of Arsenal, thank God.
You should be walking around picking people up, going over to fans, bringing all the players over, and really doing what you should do. What you shouldn't do is internalize, right, and make it all about you and how you're feeling. Because straight away, then you dismiss yourself, you separate yourself away from the club and the manager to go out there and pick him up, and you open the door to ridicule. And for me, I remember thinking to myself at that time, I mentioned a little bit earlier, I felt that the switch had flicked, and if Gallas felt he could do that, that means the environment was changing, and that was okay. You know what I mean? And I didn't like it, and I wanted him out, right? And I thought that's not what we're all about. And once you start seeing players behave like that, I always say the same things. You're a product of your environment. If that's okay in that environment, well, that's okay. And I didn't think that he should have been. I'm not sure if there was any sort of action afterwards, but I felt he should have been dealt with in a way that said that's not the right sort of behaviour. We're still in this. We need to push forward and own our destiny. And I just felt we let it happen to us and mentally folded.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Tim, can you remember any captain or player, reacting like that? And what that transmits to the other players?
Maybe not in the Premier. I mean, Eric Cantona kicked a fan.
Well, yeah, sure.
I guess.
Yeah, but
which is a pretty fragile emotional thing to do. Look, I've seen it. I've seen something similar in like South American football. Very much so. It's weird because I kind of mean it when I say, I don't know if this is just me. I didn't consider it a big deal at the time, and it might be just it was possibly a product of kind of bias on my part because I liked Gallas and I really liked the signing. It wasn't planned. It was completely opportunistic, and it was just like, right, Ashley Cole's going. He's unhappy. Let's just have a grab at that. But I always really liked Gallas. For the same reason that I like cats, because I appreciate arrogance, I value it, and so I liked him, and I really wanted that signing to work. And I was, as much as I loved Gilberto, I actually thought, wrongly as it turned out, I was quite happy with him being made captain. I thought, yeah, this is kind of what this group needs. It needs like look, I miscast him, so. But I mean, at the time, I felt, yeah, this is like a young team. It needs a guy who's been at Chelsea, won a couple of league titles, doesn't take any prisoners, will tell people when they're out of line. But what Clive says is absolutely right. He internalized it and he made it about himself, and the rest of the group sees that when you do that. And I think he lost their trust that day, and so I think. Definitely kind of in hindsight it is, well, not in hindsight for me, quite extraordinary, because I acknowledge that at the time a lot of Arsenal fans found it extraordinary as well. I didn't find it quite as extraordinary, which is not to say I found it completely normal either, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of beginning of the end stuff. And even if Gael Clichy was a bit of an idiot, he probably, I think you either put your arm around him and say, there, mate, we're still 6 points clear. Don't worry about it. We'll sort it next week. Or you go up to him and go, you fucking idiot. What are you doing? You don't go over to the advertising hoarding and start kicking the shit out of that. Confront the man, the player, your teammate, and either comfort him or put a rocket up his arse. Do one of the two, but don't kind of storm off and separate yourself from the team and make out that they've all let you down. That's not leadership.
No, and I mean, I'll stay with you for 1 second, Tim, as we start to now wrap up, and tomorrow we'll do a rewatch for patrons of the away derby, and then Friday the aftermath of this season and how a team that should have been special wound up becoming nothing. But there was a game at Old Trafford. We lost to Chelsea. We dropped a lot of games. We won 1-8, as I mentioned. But when we went to Old Trafford, as it turns out, a win there, we would have been champions, assuming all the other matches ended the way they did end. Now, maybe United wind up getting an extra point somewhere if they had lost that day, because they were making a run to the Champions League final, so they had their priorities stretched in a few places. But we take the lead through Adebayor. We wind up conceding a penalty. Ronaldo scores, and then they get a late, I think, Hargreaves winner, if I remember correctly. And as much as Birmingham is remembered as the night the title was lost, I remember still feeling like this was a big game. And as it turns out, going on to win that game, which we were leading. I mean, when Adebayor scores that goal, you realize it's not gone. And so it was snatched from us. I mean, do you remember that game being a painful one, or is it just all overshadowed by what happened, both at Birmingham and the Liverpool tie was sort of in that vicinity as well? How do you remember that Old Trafford game?
It was painful, but not quite as much as the other two. You're right. Like, we were still in with a chance, and when we went 1-0 up, you thought, oh, here we go. But I think really we kind of all knew it had gone by that point. And actually, I went there expecting to lose. I just thought, no, this team's like checked out at this stage. The reason perhaps the aftermath of it wasn't quite as painful is because I'm not sure if people will remember this, but in the away end, we stayed for about 25 minutes after the final whistle, just kind of singing, which was, I guess, a slightly weird reaction, but. And I don't know if it was an expression of, of trauma, of gratitude for, because no one really expected us to challenge for the title, and whether that was a kind of, well, you know what, all things considered, you've given it a good go, well done, thank you, or whether it was just a way of like, the tears of a clown type thing. I don't really know, but that definitely makes my memory of it quite different, because I just remember being in the ground for about 25 minutes afterwards, just singing. And I think also a little bit of it was because the Man U fans were taking the piss, and it was just a way of putting a bit of a barrier up, because when we lost that cup game in February, I remember we were 4-0 down with a few minutes to go, and none of us cared because we thought we were going to win the league. And I remember a chant that went up at the end of that game that just said, we'll be back to win the league, because we knew this fixture was coming. And we were so confident that we thought we'd have it done by then, I think. And actually, we'd looked at this fixture thinking, we might win at Old Trafford again. And obviously, the United fans reminded us that hadn't happened. So maybe it was a bit of a barrier there as well. But painful memory, but not quite the same.
And I'd say one of the legendary Manchester United players of all time, Howard Webb, did award that penalty that Ronaldo converted. So, I mean, that was the end of it. It was a Hargreaves winner in the 72nd minute. But, just once again, when you're leading that game, I remember, we get that goal in the 48th. The penalty was in the 54th. There's 6 minutes there where you're like, it's back on. This team deserves something. And I just think on the balance of play, the way we played that season, the football we played with that team, it deserved better. And the combination of refereeing decisions at Old Trafford, at Birmingham, at Anfield, at Arsenal against Liverpool, injuries, the Eduardo injury, it just robbed that team of something that should have been really special and rewarded some extraordinary football, and a team that Arsene Wenger put together kind of out of thin air and then never turned into anything. So, Clive, I mean, as that season ends, for all of the pain late, did it leave you with a sense of something really special that had happened in the aftermath of the Invincibles, and sort of a renewed hope that, wait a minute, there's a special team here again? Or were you just sort of focused more on how it had ended and the disappointment?
Yeah, I look back and think it was nice, a really nice team. I understand football differently today than I did back then. And to have almost like the situation with the three number 10s in Clive, Fabregas and Rosicky moving around with Van Persie. I mean, these are highly technical players. With a monster up front, Adebayor, the trickery and finishing of Eduardo, and then, the back four I mentioned earlier, quite a fast, rapid, quick back four, maybe not massively physical, but really good one-on-one defenders, something that we lack today, really. We're a bit slow, but these guys were quick. They were good, happy one-on-one, and they dealt with people. They could be left alone and you weren't worried about it. And some of these fundamentals I still believe in today, and when you look back and you're looking at, how we mold a team today, there was a lot of good things in that team, and there was a lot of good partnerships. The midfield four loved each other, whether I loved them all or not. They were good partnerships. They were tactically suited with each other up to a point. We had, an emerging Van Persie, not enough. We had a very good Adebayor, and so there were some really good things there. So I look back fondly, but I can't help but feel my primary feeling at the time was what could have been. And I always used to look at it and say, we let this happen to ourselves. We didn't quite manage it correctly. When you look back a bit of hindsight, you think, well, they did great for their ages, their experience, and what they brought. And some of the things we spoke about tonight, these are memories that will stay with me for a long, long time. You know, they gave us some memories that will not leave me, and some of the most fond memories I've had of watching football. So, again, at the time, hated it. Hated every minute because I hate Man United, I hate Chelsea. But looking back, it's nice. It was really nice.
Yeah, and I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find a season like that where through almost all of February, you're one of the great league teams of all times in some ways, playing the best football, having Pele say you're the best team on the planet, and then heartbreak, utter heartbreak, injury heartbreak, injustice heartbreak, mental collapse heartbreak, your players letting you down, the referees letting you down, the opposition, you're doing things that are unconscionable across multiple competitions, just ridiculous to have a season with that kind of dichotomy of emotion and to end that way. Tim, as a final thought, of all the teams post Invincibles, was that the best team to watch? Was there any that you could put next to it that you felt kind of delivered the same kind of entertainment value? Maybe, what was it, 10-11 was another one?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yeah, I think maybe 10-11 was quite similar in a way, in that sprung up and died just as quickly. That I think it was christened the Theo Van Nasrigas front four, and Jack Wilshere had just come on the scene, and again we were playing this kind of fast technical football, and again we were getting back into the title race. And then Fabregas gets injured, Van Persie gets injured, we lose the Carling Cup final, Nasri and Fabregas fuck off, and it all just, and Song starts believing that he's actually Song Aldinho, and Wilshere gets injured, and that all falls apart quickly as well, which has become a depressingly recurring theme at Arsenal over the last few years. We get something that works, and then a couple of injuries just wipe it all out. But yeah, I think this was, I'm not sure that there were elements of this that were an accident. Like Flamini, for example. I'm not sure Arsene Wenger was banking on Adebayor scoring 30 goals in a season. I'm not sure that in his heart of hearts he genuinely thought Adebayor was going to have a season like that. So I think a few things kind of came together. But yeah, I think certainly during the autumn of this season, I thought it was just some of the best football I saw us play. And then in the couple of months after that, around Christmas time, probably some of the smartest. Like there was a game at Everton between Christmas and New Year, and Everton away on like December the 29th. That's a horrible fixture, and we weren't very good, but we beat them 4-1 because we were just so on it and so clinical. And I love that's my favourite Arsenal. I really like watching like the great beautiful football and everything. But like I say, like when you're at like that kind of peak, it's not going to last. So what I'm really looking for is, what does the 7 out of 10 Arsenal look like? What does the turn up Saturday, Sunday home game against shit kickers FC, what does that Arsenal look like? That's what really interests me, and that's what really interested me during that season, because I knew that autumn run wouldn't go on forever. It was, what are we going to look like after this? And for a couple of months I thought I was delighted with how we looked, because we lost that momentum but we kept that kind of smarts about us, and therefore I didn't see the kind of the mental collapse coming.
Well, we weren't jaded yet. I think that the salient point here is, there were seasons when we were in first or near first in, December, January, subsequent to that, where you're like, no, we'll blow it. Don't worry. We're not really in a title race.
This was the first one of those, wasn't it?
Yes. And so we were dumb enough when we were clear in February and playing the best football to assume it was going to happen. So it was pre-jaded era where you could believe in this. I mean, this is a Tale of Two Cities should have been written about this. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, all in the same season. So Clive, I mean, tomorrow we'll do a rewatch and maybe just sort of celebrate a moment in time during that period when Arsenal were on it. Sound good to you?
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
Let's
Good
go
stuff.
for it.
And then
Let's go for it. It'll be interesting to see tactically if what we see, right? So
yeah,
I can't
and how
wait.
the game has changed too. But yeah, I mean, more than anything, I think it'd be interesting then Friday to talk about what happened to that team because I've seen buildings implode slower than this team did. So we'll definitely get into that. Tim's on Twitter at Roberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePF. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have a blog I wrote about how that team broke up, so I will link to that for Friday's pod. If you have 40 minutes and 5,000 words you're in the mood for of me, it's not going to be a lot of takers for that. But in any event, we're going to keep on keeping on and talk some Arsenal while there's something to talk about. In any event, I just hope you're doing well. Always say it, but I hope everyone's hanging in there. And I know the walls are starting to feel like they're closing in on me a little bit, but we'll get through it. In any case, if I say that one more time, I'm going to hurt myself. We're going to do the rewatch tomorrow for patrons. We're going to do the Aftermath pod on Friday. Clive and I talked a little bit about the Mesut Ozil situation yesterday, so if you haven't heard that yet, you can get stuck into that. We'll say goodbye for now, but we'll talk to you on Thursday and again on Friday. We love you. We'll talk to you after Arsenal 20, COVID-19.